Ralbag, I write you this week, what I want to ask you the week for Pesach to speak again for us. For Yeshiva Tensionam, then you know it already.
Week before Pesach is usually very, very busy.
Okay, now 2 weeks of Pesach.
Maybe this year is easier because Pesach is Erev Shabbos.
Yeah, because no.
So therefore, the
I
Shabbos
sent you an
before
email this week. Okay?
Bli Neder, we'll see further.
Bli Neder. Good.
Rabbijn Katz, did you find it?
Yeah. 1 second. We're getting there now. Yeah. There we go. And we just admit few people. There we go. Share screen. There we are. Yes, it's there.
Make it a little bigger, please. If you don't mind.
Boo, where do you do that?
Okay.
No, I have to, 1 second. I have to stop share. I have to go back to this. No. Ik weet dat de control zo. Oké, scoor. Let me go back to Zoom. Yes.
Okay, let's start. Thank you, Rabbijn Katz. I would like to continue today. Firstly, the shir is given Lilu Nishmas Chaver, Reb Gershon ben Chaver, Reb Shmuel Alevi, Zechoni Levrocha Eisenman, and it should be an Ilu Neshama, all the Torah that we're learning from Mene Eisenman, Reb Gershon Eisenman, who was a Rosh Rishon Lechol Dover Shebekdusha, as we said on Friday, and followed by his sons in the Kehillah. This should be a Ilu Neshama for him and his learning. Also, I want to thank Rabbijn Katz for arranging, again, the Jarchei Kallo, 31 years, going strong, in Mitzvah Ad Bias Mashiach, and afterwards as well, Rabbijn Katz. Warum nicht? Yeah, toch waar. Warum nicht? Okay. So we discussed on Friday, we introduced the topic, what does it mean? And like I said on Friday, if anybody wants to ask questions, just unmute yourself, and we can discuss during the shir. It's always better than having to wait till the end or sending me text. I don't respond to text in the middle of the shir. It's difficult. So therefore, it's better if you ask questions and unmute yourself. So we discussed on Friday the basic concepts of Pikuach Nefesh. And we saw the Chiddush of the Maggid Mishnah that even if it's 1 in 1,000 chance that it's going to happen, that still constitutes, that is still Pikuach Nefesh. And therefore, a woman who's giving birth, even though there's only 1 in 1,000 chance that anything will happen to her, you're allowed to be Mechalel Shabbos on Shabbos because of it. Better to do with the Shinui, because it's a natural occurrence, says the Maggid Mishnah, but clearly 1 in 1,000 is considered enough. And we saw the spin, which is a spider. By the way, who's a spider in Netherlands?
Spin,
oh, that's what I thought. So heb ik gedacht over Shabbos, but I didn't remember anymore. You know, it's been 30 years, 35 years, more than 37 years. So I didn't remember what it's called. But it's a spin, so that's what the Mishnah Berurah talks about, the Shulchan Aruch talks about. The spin, Belashon Ashkenaz, like Dr. Blumendahl told me. It's spin Belashon Ashkenaz, which is a spider. And the spider that might fall in my food, even though it's 1 in 1,000 chance, the Magen Avraham says, no, that's clearly not Pikuach Nefesh. You cannot be Mechalel Shabbos. You're not allowed to kill the spider. And the way we explained it, on Friday was, there's a difference if the sakana is befanenu or not. By a woman giving birth, the sakana is befanenu. By a spider, it's not befanenu. It's not in my food. Who says it's going to happen? And therefore, it's not called sakana b'fanenu, and then the halachas of pikuach nefesh don't necessarily apply. Imkain in ledavar seif. Maybe you can work on Shabbos because something will happen and I won't have any food left and I'll starve and I'll die. Ein ledavar seif. And then therefore, if the sakana is not b'fanenu, you cannot be mechal Shabbos. That's one chiddush that we said on Friday. We said, well, if the sakana is not b'fanenu, how do you gauge then what's considered pikuach nefesh or not? And we said, Shlomo Zalman says if people consider it pikuach nefesh, and then Gidon Mandel asked the question, well, that's current. Could you take the vaccines of corona on Shabbos? So he said, it really depends. If a person doesn't take it on Shabbos and he has to wait a day to take it, nish gefährlich, he'll do it the next day. But if he cannot take it on Shabbos and they tell him his tor, his line is on Shabbos, his turn is on Shabbos, and then they tell him, well, if you don't take it Shabbos, you're not going to have it for another 2 weeks. Well, many people would consider that maybe pikuach nefesh to go 2 weeks without the vaccine. And therefore, that's even there for Shabbos. It would depend on the situation, what people consider pikuach nefesh. Today, I want to go 2 chidushim, even deeper into be considered what's considered sakana b'fonenu or not. 2 big chidushim. One is from Rabasha Weiss that he told me himself. He sent me a tshuva. We discussed guns in shul. Is that called pikuach nefesh or not? Well, what's the chance that my shul will get hit by a terrorist attack? Lo Aleinu? It's so weit, it's so far away. Why would that happen? That's more than 1 in 1,000. It's 1 in 10,000, 1 in 100,000. Why is that sakana b'fanenu? Clearly, it should be forbidden. Somebody asked me, what about walkie-talkies? Jews walk around with walkie-talkies. I'm not talking about Hatzalah. Hatzalah, it's every week, all the time. Clearly, that's sakana b'fanenu. It happens all the time. But a terrorist attack for shmirah outside the shul, the Jews should be able to carry guns or carry walkie-talkies. Maybe that's a serious shayla. After all, it's not sakana b'fanenu. What's the chance it's going to happen? So I want to say 2 big chidushim, one from Rabasha Weiss, and the other one, Shlita, and the other one, which I saw in the Sefer, brought down from Reb Shaul Yisraeli, Hagoyin Reb Shaul Yisraeli, who was a chaver of the Bezdin Hagadol 50 years ago. Maybe other people also said it, but that's a chiddush, a big chiddush, but it makes us understand the concepts of pikuach nefesh, sakana b'fonenu, and then already we can try and apply it to corona, to walkie-talkies on Shabbos, guns in shul, anything, what's considered pikuach nefesh or what's not considered pikuach nefesh. Let's start with the chiddush of Rabasha Weiss. So he asks like this, the following question he asks. We saw on number 1 on the sheet, if you see Chazorah from Friday, the Magen Mishnah. The Magen Mishnah says that the reason why Yoledes, you can be Mechal Shabbos, even though you should do a little bit of a shinui, even though it's a danger. But Tam Bezen Nira, says the Magen Mishnah, that the pain of the woman giving birth, that's like something which is natural to her. And only 1 in 1,000 die. And therefore try and do a shinui if you can. But if you cannot do a shinui, that's also okay. You can be Machal Shabbos. So he says that 1 in 1,000 and bi'ikaron, you'd be able to be Machal Shabbos. Even though it's 1 in 1,000, you'd be able to be Machal Shabbos. So the question is a Trumas Hadeshin. Trumas Hadeshin on number 2 on the sheet talks about a case where there's a fire in a city. And the Trumas Hadeshin was a Rishon, a late Rishon, and the Trumas Hadeshin writes that there was a fire in the city. Then rather than extinguishing the fire, which is permitted, and even you're allowed to extinguish a fire because it might spread, but they did worse. They went and they dug pits. Who's as in fires, you don't want the fire to go further, so they dig ta'alot and pits and dirt. So what happened was, number 2, Hinei machmat hadleika asher yotza b'Shabbos b'yirchem b'chafartem gumois b'hishveisem gumois b'tachtem avodem b'ofa yachad k'mabinyan. You actually went on Shabbos, and the people in the city went, dug pits, built walls, they did chafira, they did choresh, they did boine, they did all the averes, all the malachas deraises. Says the Trumas Hadeshin, Nire, son writes it, Ladoni Yavi, she'isu gomur huzeh. This is clearly an Issa deraisa. You had no right digging those pits and building everything because of the fire. That's Chilul Shabbos. So a few reasons. Number one, the ha al iske mamoin hu, it wasn't for pikuach nefesh, it was just for your houses getting burnt. So that's mamoin, that's money, that's not pikuach nefesh. And even if you want to say that it might be pikuach nefesh and different things, the dafked leke hitira zeruashi melacha shein tzichel gufa. Aber chafiru bingen ab melacha deraisa ikel meim da hitru b'shvich shasa konazeh. He says that they're only allowed to extinguish a fire. Taking out a fire, kibui, is melacha shein tzichel gufa. It's not for the purpose of the Mishkan. It's not mamish deraisa, and therefore that's why that's permitted. But to go and build and do chayresh and boina and everything, that you're not allowed to. Why? Bishvil chshash sakona kozeh. It's only a chshash. It's only, maybe it's pikuach nefesh. Not real pikuach nefesh. Something might happen. Therefore, you cannot do an issa deraisa for chshash sakona zeh. And Abasha Weiss asked the question, I said, I don't understand. He said, fires destroying cities, especially in the olden days. You know, right, the Great Fire, I was once in Prague, and they showed me Prague before 1803 and Prague after 1803. It was a big fire, and it literally destroyed one house after another. So there's definitely more than 1 in 1,000 chance that there'll be pikuach nefesh, that people will get killed. So why can't you take out a fire and build pits and do whatever you need to do? It's only chash zakonazu. It's more than 1,000 chance that people will get killed and the whole city will be destroyed and people will lose their lives. It's more than 1,000 chance. So why does the Tumas Hadeshin forbid it? Why is it only chash zakonazu? It's clearly befonenu. There's a fire going on. So why would that be forbidden? Good kasha. Says Abasha Weiss, a big chiddush. Says Abasha Weiss that it's not enough that something is a sakona befonenu. The reason why a yoledes is permitted, let's be honest, a yoledes is sakona befonenu? No, it's not. She's giving birth now. The chance, giving birth means something might happen. But the chance that something happening is 1 in 1,000. So of course it's more befonenu than the spider falling into the food, which didn't happen yet. But a woman giving birth, there's no pikuach nefesh now. It's 1 in 1,000 that something might happen. So why is that permitted? Says Abasha Weiss, you know why that's permitted? There's a difference between a sakona mikris and a sakona tivis. A sakona that comes from the outside and might happen upon me, then maybe 1 in 1,000 you have to check by that coming from the outside. But a sakona tivit, a sakona which is inherent, inherent, tivit, it's part of this person. That's like it's befonenu. It's going to happen at some point to some woman. It's here already. I don't know if it's going to happen to this woman, but it's inherent. It's part of giving birth. If it's inherent, that's called sakana befonenu. By the fire, a fire burning down and causing a loss of life is 1 in 1,000, 1 in 500. But it's not tivit. It's not natural, even after the fire, to this occurrence. It might happen, it might not happen. It's 1 in 1,000. But a woman giving birth, it's part of the teva of a woman to give birth that somebody will die. That's a sakana, that's tivit, that's inherent, that's part of the person. That's called befonenu. Therefore, that is permitted and not the fire. Let's read it inside number 3a. V'nira bezeh, the shani sakana mikrit, k'maisa shaya, shebo yesh lanu lishkol, we have to weigh as goydel achshash l'sakonas nefashos. What's called pikuach nefesh might not be the same. Misakonas tivis, from a natural, inherent sakana, ukvua. The malon, who cares, b'meshe isha achas me'alaf eine mesa, that only 1 in 1,000 women die. If if we're not going to be Mechal Shabbos for all women who give birth, inherently, it's not even a chance. Inherently, part of the nature is that a woman will die from birth. It doesn't make a difference how, when it's going to happen. It's inherent to a woman giving birth that somebody will die. That's a sakana tivis. That's much stronger. That's much more powerful. And that's why we're allowed to be Mechal Shabbos for every Yoledes. And says the Basha Weiss, and if that's the svara sakana tivis, inherent sakana, then perhaps you can do pikuach nefesh. It's called pikuach nefesh, even if the sakana is not befonenu. But if it's tivis, it's part of the nature, then that's considered always befonenu, even if it's not befonenu. And it doesn't make a difference, the percentages. And he says that's the reason why in a hospital you're allowed to write down, all things. Let's say prescriptions you have to write down, or you have to write down the results of tests. He says why? Because a hospital is a marechet. It's an organization that the teva, the nature of this organizations, is that there is going to be at some point a pikuach nefesh. So therefore, this sakana is inherent to the hospital. And therefore, it doesn't make a difference if it's now or in a year from now, but it's for sure going to happen. And therefore, you're allowed to be Mechal Shabbos. Try and do it with a shinui, but that's like a yoledes. That's called a sakana tivit. It's inherent. Look at number B. The yisoid zehu even yisoid bizmanenu. That's a fundamental yisoid. But vayanu lodun b'dinei pikuach nefesh. We want to try and gauge pikuach nefesh. B'marachos gedolos. In big organizations, כגון בבתי חולים, בצברה ובמשטרה שבארץ ישראל, if you have hospitals or armies or police, שרובוי כלכולוי של פילוסים עושה פיקוח נפש. They're always dealing with פיקוח נפש situations. ויש הוראות קפדניות, and there are strict measures in place, שנועדו that are meant לשמור על חייהם של החולים ואזרחים. That you have to follow certain procedures. Going rishum kaptani shel matan trufot lecholim, if you're going to matan meneshek, how you write down who gets which medication. And many times Chilul Shabbos is involved. You're going to start judging every case. Well, is this pikuach nefesh for me to write down the prescription for this chayla? It's not pikuach nefesh. Doesn't make a difference, he says. If you're not going to be makbid on this, you're not going to be careful about this, you're going. If you're not going to be careful every to write down his medication, it's similar to the yoledes, the woman giving birth, because that's called tivit. That's called inherent pikuach nefesh. Everybody understands this yisoid of Rav Asher Weiss. Any questions on this yisoid? You see the difference between something, in other words, he took the Magid Mishnah that says kedavar tiv'ila. The Magid Mishnah number 1 writes that it's something, birth is a natural occurrence, and he says no, because it's natural, it makes it inherent. It makes it TV. It makes it part of the woman. And therefore, it's here already. It's befonenu, even if it's not necessarily befonenu. And therefore, a hospital which runs a certain way has to continue running like that by chayla sheyesh by sakana, because it's called inherent. It's pikuach nefesh. It's TV. It's part of it. That's called befonenu. That's a big chiddush. And based on that, he was matir to me the guns in the shul, and the same way the walkie-talkie. And that's a little bit of a chiddush. And he says like this, look at number C, Rabbi Katz, move a little bit up. In number C on the sheet, he wants to say.
Rabbi Ralbag, if I may, sorry, I'm asking again, but is there a difference
between... By the way,
between...
I like when you ask.
Thank you.
I'll tell you why. Because if I'm not on Zoom, then I interact with the people. For all I know, people can be sleeping, drinking the coffee. I don't know what people are doing now. It's very hard. So at least I get a reaction. You react. So at least I know that somebody's listening. Everybody is listening, but at least I know I get feedback. That's the hard part. Anybody who's a teacher will tell you that Zoom is very, very challenging.
Yes, it is. My question is, isn't choyle sheyesh bo sakona a definition by itself?
Yes,
I
had the same. Gideon had the same question. Choyle sheyesh bo sakona, anyway, it's permitted because you're allowed to do anything hatzorich loy, like the Mishnah Berurah writes. Correct, but that's not. I know he throws it in. I know if I can be medayik in his words, but the nekuda he's saying over here, and you'll see the chiddush how he throws it into guns. He says that's called tiv'i, and if that's called tiv'i, then that's inherent, and even that's called befonenu. That's his chiddush.
I understand, but the point is that Yoledes is anyways a choyle sheyesh bo sakona. She's allowed to eat on Yom Kippur. You're allowed to do anything for her. So
I know, but the question is no, because the point is the choyle sheyesh bo sakona is so far removed. She's not now in a matzav of pikuach nefesh. Somebody has now a heart attack. That's a matzav of pikuach nefesh. Yoledes, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 2,000, even get to the sakana. So why is that choyle sheyesh bo sakana? That's his question. His point is because it's TV, it's inherent, and therefore inherent is the key point of the Yoledes.
Rav Ralbag,
Yes.
do you hear me?
Yes.
That means that the whole din of Suffolk is only with Master TV. If it's not TV, then even a Suffolk pikuach nefesh is not chal.
No. If it's TV, then even 1 in 1,000. If it's not TV, then it depends. If it's what's name? If the rubble fell on a person, right? The Gemara says, even though that's not TV, but the rubble fell on a person. Okay, maybe there's a Jew there. That's befonenu mamish. The chiddush is that something which is the chiddush is that something which is TV, even if it's not befonenu, is also called pikuach nefesh.
And it's not TV, then it's
and then you have to see percentage wise if it's called pikuach nefesh, not called pikuach nefesh, befonenu, etc., etc. The Shmuel Katz, Rabbi Katz, you're right. The Magen Mishnah uses TV for a kula, for chumrah, or for a chumrah, and a Basha Weiss use it for a kula. Correct. I agree with that. I saw your ha'ara, though I don't usually respond to text, but I saw your ha'ara. But yes, that's what comes out. But listen what he says further. He wants to be mechadish even further. Ulegabe nidon didon, with the guns, he wants to say, carry guns in shul. He says, well, that's, right? He says there's 1 in 100,000. What's the chance that my shul will get hit? Doime hadover ktsas l'chol anal. It's a little similar to this TV. Why? We cannot judge based on statistics. What's the level of sakana lipigua terror b'mokem mesuyam for terrorist attack on a specific place? When it's clear, shemedubar b'sakana rechoika b'yosel. Very vaitich shash. Very little chance it's going to happen. Ach meidach yisa, barur, it's clear, on the other hand, it's for sure going to happen at some point in the future. And therefore, the more protection, the less of a sakana. If it's talking about a malacha deraisa, a real malacha deraisa, I would be careful. The chance is very far. You cannot really say that a terrorist attack going to happen in America at some shul is mamish TV, inherent like a Yoledes. But on the other hand, it's not mamish mikra as well. Why? Because since it's for sure going to happen at some point, it's almost a marechet of shuls that a terrorist attack will happen at some point. It's somewhere in between. So therefore, Basha Weiss says it's similar to the Yoledes, but it's not mamish the same, he says. And therefore, since it's only an Issa de Rabbanon, and this of carrying a gun or carrying a walkie-talkie, it's only the Rabbanon, especially the place where there's an Eruv, he was mater halacha l'maisa to carry the guns and to carry the walkie-talkies. Again, not to talk in a walkie-talkie unless you need to, unless it's shash pikuach nefesh. Doesn't mean you can talk in a walkie-talkie, hey, what's going on with you? How was your sleep last night? That's clearly forbidden. But to carry the walkie-talkie, which is only muktzah, and to carry the gun, which is only muktzah, he was mater based on this similar svara to a sakana tivit. Almost, it's not mamish the same, because it's not inherent in the situation, but it's somewhat inherent, because it's going to happen at some point, and therefore he calls that perhaps befonenu, and he was mater, at least in Issa de Rabbanon. So that's one big chiddush of looking at a sakana. Again, what do we do?
Rav Ralbag,
wait, one second, Roddy, 1 second. We spoke about sakana. We said it has to be befonenu. By the spider, it's not befonenu at all. Your lettuce is befonenu. If Asher Weiss expands befonenu, he makes it a little greater, and he says, well, if something is inherent, a sakana that's part of what's going to happen, it's nature of this woman giving birth, then that's called sakana befonenu. Then you don't have to look at percentages. Dr. Bio says correctly so. If it's in sakana mikris, then you have to look. Is that called pikuach nefesh? Is that not? Then 1 in 1,000 is not called pikuach nefesh. Maybe 1 in 50 is yes called pikuach nefesh. That's a different situation. But if it's a sakana tivis, if it's inherent, then even if it's a vaitach shash, it's more of a called sakana befonenu. And Rav Asher Weiss takes it a step further, and therefore even something which is not mamish befonenu, since it's going to happen, it's part of the marechet, like the bet cholim, like the hospital, it's part of the what's going to happen to this institution. Therefore, that's called a sakana tivis, and therefore you don't have to look at percentages, and perhaps even guns in shuls or walkie-talkies for shmirah. In the marechet of shuls, it's going to happen another terrorist attack at some point, and therefore that's called sakana befonenu, and you can be mater even though there's 1 in 100,000 chance that your shul will get hit. That's the first chiddush, the expansion of the concept of sakana tivi, sakana befonenu. Yes, Ronnie, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, no problem. Could you also say that because there's a situation where, let's say, terrorists always look or might look at shuls, how they are protected, that if you're not wearing guns or don't have shmire, that there's a bigger chance that your shul will be hit because other shuls aren't. So actually, it increases what that
could very well be, but that's maybe in a place like Amsterdam. In Amsterdam, everybody knows a terrorist is going to come. He comes to the 5 shuls. He knows that's it. The ones that he'll hit. In America, where you have 100,000 shuls, the chance of your shul getting hit is so remote. It's a bigger chance of getting hit by a car, Leilenu. So to take some type of sakana tivis. Yes.
Benek.
Yes.
Morning, the air's scared.
Okay, that's not a question. Next. So that's the first chiddush that I wanted to say. Then there's another chiddush, because this doesn't really help in every case. And if it's not even guns, it doesn't really help us with, because it's not really a sakana tivit. It's not really inherent. I saw another chiddush which expands sakana befonenu into a much greater way. And that's really an eye-opener, and it's a big chiddush. I'm not sure if it's 100% correct, but I saw this chiddush from Chervev, the Bezdin Hagadol, 50, 60 years ago. And let's learn it together. And perhaps that's really an eye-opener, what constitutes pikuach nefesh. See, there's a Gemara in Eruvin.
Ja, test hem.
Yeah, you had yes? No.
Test hem.
Somebody has to mute himself.
Yes, Gidon, what's your question?
No, I'm saying there's somebody who's unmuted. That's the noise that everybody's hearing.
I know. Meneer Clay, could you please unmute yourself? Dank u wel.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so computers. Anyway, so the Gemara in Eruvin says like this, number 4 on the sheet. Says the Gemara that we're talking about if you're allowed to go outside of the tchum on Shabbos. You're not allowed to go outside the Tchum on Shabbos. And the Gemara says, but nevertheless, some people who had to go out for whatever reason, for certain reasons, they're allowed to go back to the place where they came from, even though it's outside the Tchum. So the Gemara says, one of them is, that anybody who goes out to save somebody's life for an army, he's allowed to go back to his place. So Gemara says, Vafilo Tuva, even if it's more than 2,000 amas, even if it's outside the Tchum, we saw that the Gemara Mishnah says, only allowed to go 2,000 amas. You don't have to be Daled amas, you don't have to stay mamish in the place. You're allowed to go 2,000 amas, but you cannot go more than 2,000 amas. So what does it mean? You cannot go more than 2,000 amas. So the Gemara says, Rav Yud Rav, shechoizrin biklei zayon limkaimon. Says Rashi, loy teima afilu tuva. You're not allowed to go more than 2,000 amas. The loy shori el alpaim, you're only allowed to go back 2,000 amas. But the chiddush of the Mishnah is the choizrin biklei zayon. You're allowed to go carrying your guns, even though you're carrying on Shabbos in the Rishus Rabbim. Why are you allowed to do that? It's Chilul Shabbos. How could you carry your guns? Even 2,000 amas, even within the Tchum. How could you carry your guns? Below Yambrina, we don't say Kiven de Nasa Maisa Yashlichu Kli Zainon Me'alein, that since they went to battle, they should leave their guns behind. Below you Chalo Shabbos b'Chazor, and you cannot be Mechalo Shabbos. The time of Mefarish Lekamon. And the Gemara is going to explain the reason why you're allowed to carry your guns back. So the Gemara says, why are you allowed to carry your guns back? After all, the war is finished. Leave your guns in the field. Come back after Shabbos to pick up your guns. What heter do you have to carry your guns back to the place, to the city? So the Gemara says, Kidatanya, because the Brisa, what happened? In the beginning, they left their guns right outside the city. They didn't carry Bishus Rabbim. They didn't go inside the city, didn't carry Bishus Rabbim. It was only a Carmelist. They didn't take it inside. They didn't carry on the streets. One time there was a war, and the enemy saw they were not carrying guns. They chased after them, and they went to take their guns quickly, and then the enemies went to chase them. They stampeded each other. There was pushed each other. And many people were killed. So the Gemara says, you know why you're allowed to go back with your guns and carry the guns on the streets of the city and do Chilul Shabbos? Because if you don't carry your guns, maybe it's a sakana. Maybe the enemies will come and chase you all the way into your city, and therefore you have to have your guns with you at all times. So they allowed you to carry your guns back after the war, even though the war is finished already. There is no more pikuach nefesh. You're allowed to carry your guns with you back to your city within 2,000 amas, because in case you leave your guns behind, you might get killed. The Rambam, very straightforward Gemara. Yes.
There's another question. Are you allowed to leave your guns outside the city, and this way you can become it can become sakonas the forces?
Okay. The Gemara does not. I hear that. The Gemara does not entertain that situation. For some reason, there was no problem. There were no goyim around. Whatever it was, that wasn't the Gemara's question. The Gemara says it was because of Maisa Shahaya. That's why they allowed you to carry your guns back into the city. Says the Rambam, I suppose the guns were behind lock and key inside the house, samuch the city. So therefore, nobody's going to take the guns. Just if you're left without a gun, then they might come and chase you, and that's why they allowed you. Says the Rambam, quotes this Gemara, Halacha 4a, if the goyim come to kill you, and they're trying to kill you, you're allowed to go fight the war on Shabbos and Mechal Shabbos. Save the Jew from the guy on Shabbos. You're allowed to be Mechal Shabbos. You're allowed to go to war. Says the Vasilans Mamer Lemutza Shabbos, and you cannot wait till after Shabbos. You have to fight the war on Shabbos. Pikuach nefesh. Says the Rambam, And when they save their brothers, mutar lehen lachzor b'klei zayin shalehen limkoimim b'Shabbos. You're allowed to go back with the weapons. Says Rambam, why? Kedei sheloi lahachshilon le'osid lavon. What does that mean? The Rambam says, you know why you're allowed to go back with your guns? Sheloi lahachshilon le'osid lavon. Because if I'm not going to let you go back with your guns, then next time you won't go out. You won't go out and fight a battle, and somebody will get killed. If you don't allow them to go back with the guns, then next time they're not going to go out, and therefore there'll be pikuach nefesh, and somebody will get killed. Where does the Rambam get it from? The Gemara says you're not allowed to go back with your guns because maybe they'll chase you and you won't have to defend yourself. The Rambam is not talking about the sakana now in the war. The Rambam is talking about because next war that will happen, you won't go out or you won't have guns. And that's pikuach nefesh. Where does the Rambam get it from? The Markeves HaMishnah asks this question. V'yesh litmoya. The min ha'gemara nere the mimaisa shahaya iskinu shichayzer limkoimim b'chlei zayon. Because the reason they allowed you to go back with guns is because of maisa shahaya. Because it might kill you on the way out back. Ve'ich kosev Rabbeinu the time ahava mishum sheloi tei machshilon la'asid lavoi. Because in the future you won't have guns. In the future you won't go and fight the battle. Where does the Rambam get it from? Why? That's not befonenu. That's not now. It's in the future. Where does the Rambam get from that constitutes pikuach nefesh now to be mechal Shabbos? What's the chiddush of the Rambam? Pele, what does he mean? Says Reb Shol Yisraeli, we find one other Gemara that says that you're allowed to be mechal Shabbos now, because if I don't allow you to be mechal Shabbos now, even though there's no real pikuach nefesh now, and there's no mitzvah to be mechal Shabbos now, it might not come and do the same thing in the future. You look at the future. By Kiddush HaChodesh, the Mishnah says in Rosh Hashanah, Mein shenire ba'alil, ben shenoine ba'alil, mechal Shabbos Shabbos. You're allowed to be mechal Shabbos whether the moon is clear, the moon is not clear, other people saw it, other people did not see it. There's a mitzvah, there's a halacha, that b'moy adau. That means that you have to make the Yom Tovim in the right times. Rosh Chodesh has to be the right time. In the olden days, they would go and they had to be Mikadesh as a Chodesh. They had to go, 2 Eidim had to come to Bezdin and say that we saw the new moon. That was the halacha. And unless 2 Eidim came to Bezdin, you could not say it's Rosh Chodesh. So the halacha is that's Doicha Shabbos. Why? Because the pasuk says b'moy adoi, that make sure Rosh Chodesh Yom Tov is the right day. The only way Yom Tov is the right day if the Eidim come and say we saw the new moon, and therefore you're allowed to be mechal Shabbos. The Gemara learns it from a pasuk, and even be mechal Shabbos to come to Bezdin, travel to Bezdin in order to tell Bezdin we saw the new moon, and therefore you have to make Rosh Chodesh this day. You have to make Yom Tov that day. That's halach. It's not pikuach nefesh, but it's a mitzvah to be mechal Shabbos in order to be mekadesh es hachodesh. So the Mishnah says whether the moon is clear, the moon is not clear, you're allowed to be mechal Shabbos. You don't know, maybe you're the only one, maybe you're not the only one, you're allowed to be mechal Shabbos. Says the Gemara, Mishnah, Maisa she'avru ibru yesim aboim zug. There once 40 groups of Eidim came to Bezdin. You know, when you feel you bent over Bodach, so you had 40 groups coming to say that they saw the moon. One is enough. 2 Eidim is enough. The other 39, zayn over Bodach. They're extra. They still had to come. They didn't know if everybody else came. 40 groups came to be Mekadesh as a Chodesh. V'ikvim Rebbe Akiva belud. Rebbe Akiva held them there until after Shabbos. You can't go back. You can't go back. We Mekadesh the Chodesh already. Thank you for your service. We don't need you anymore. But you cannot be Mechal Shabbos on the way back. Sholach le Rebbe Gamliel. So Gamliel told him, Im ma'akev ato esarabim nimtzes machshilon le'asid lavoi. If you're going to be ma'akev esarabim, if you're not going to let anybody go back, then nimtzes machshilon le'asid lavoi. Next time, they're not going to come on Shabbos in order to say the new moon, in order to come to Bezdin. So therefore, you're allowed to be Mechalel Shabbos even on the way back, so that next time you'll make sure that everybody will come. Otherwise, next time they're not going to come. What's the pshat? Right now, the mitzvah is gone. You did what you had to do. There's no heter now to be Mechalel Shabbos on the way back. Before you have to go be Mekadesh the Chodesh, before you come to Beis Din, that's all part of the mitzvah of Mekadesh the Chodesh. That's Doicha Shabbos, that pushes aside Shabbos. But on the way back, there's no mitzvah once you've Mekadesh the Chodesh already. So why could you be Mechalel Shabbos? Says the Mishnah, because if you're not going to allow you to go back, then next time you're not going to come to be Mekadesh the Chodesh on Shabbos. So what does that mean? Says this tshuva from Rav Yisraeli that it tells me that when it comes to things which you're allowed to do on Shabbos, even though it's Chilul Shabbos, for example, Kiddush HaChodesh, you don't look just at this situation, but part of the mitzvah of being Mekadesh as a Chodesh, which allows you to be Mechalel Shabbos, is you have to look at this situation and every future situation that's for sure going to happen down the line. That's all part of machshirim, of the permission to be Mechalel Shabbos. This Shabbos includes in that any future situations that's for sure going to happen is permitted, is included in the heter to be Mechalel Shabbos this time. Look at number 6a. V'chein b'mitzvahs b'moyadoi, which means you're allowed to be Mechalel Shabbos. In order to say the new moon, Kvua v'medes hiolenu b'rega zeh, gam al ma sheyavoi ba'asit. It means that not just this situation, but every future situation that's for sure going to happen. V'al kein, kol ma sh'anu yecholim lasos b'chdei lahoitzi lepoyal es hamutar leinu b'mitzvahs elu gam ba'asit, that whatever is included in Mekadesh the Chodesh, this Shabbos and any future Shabbos, harei hein bichlal machshirim. That's included in the heter of doing it for this Shabbos. Shemein lasan be'erev Shabbos, mutar lasan zikam Shabbos doim letzim hamitzvah atzmo. That if you cannot do it on Shabbos, machshirim, which is a preparation in order to be Mekadesh the Chodesh, then you can do it even on Shabbos itself. And therefore, says Rav Yisraeli, that's pshat, why the Gemara allows you to go and be Mekadesh the Chodesh and go back after you did it. Because if I don't let you go back, then in the future, which is for sure going to happen, you won't come. And therefore, that's included in the Chilul Shabbos of this week as well, that's permitted. And therefore, he says, that's the same with the Rambam with going to war. When you look at a situation of going to war, and I allow you to be Mechalel Shabbos, this Shabbos to go to war, you have to not just look at this Shabbos, we have to look on a grand scale, all future Shabbos. And if this Shabbos I don't let you to go back with your weapons, then next Shabbos you won't do that. If there's another war, not next Shabbos, next war, whenever that happens, but there will be another war at some point in the future, then you won't fight. And there'll be pikuach nefesh, and lives will be lost. So if I look at it at this specific Shabbos, you're right. There's no heter to come back right after Shabbos, to come back with your weapons. There's no pikuach nefesh anymore. But the Rambam says no. But if I look at it this Shabbos and any future war, so any future war is included in the pikuach nefesh, and therefore if I don't allow you this Shabbos to come back with your weapons, there will be for sure a pikuach nefesh later down the line that's going to happen because of it. And therefore, from a macro view, from a large scale view, all that is included in the heter of pikuach nefesh for this Shabbos. And that's what he writes in number 6b. V'zehu pirish b'sha'azu nimtzas machshilan l'ased lavai. If you're not going to allow you right now to carry back your weapons, that at some point in the same situation, it will cause pikuach nefesh, a loss of life. Nimtza turns out, then coming back with the weapons now, it's necessary that later on there's going to have to be a different type of saving. If you're not going to allow right now to take back the weapons, pam liibud nefesh. Al keina reize begedem machshire pikuach nefesh shegam mihuta vuadin v'tam b'kiddush hachodesh. V'lomadnu mikan. See, very important. Big yisoid. Halacha gedola. Shegam hatzolos nefoshois shela osid lavoi. That even future pikuach nefesh saving lives, sha'on yodim, that we know shezeh yavoi epam, that that's for sure going to happen. Hareze nechshav, it's called ki'ilu hu kvar nimtzes lefonenu achshav. Then it's all in front of me right now. V'aleinu lasas hakol ki'ilu hapikuach nefesh lefonenu. He expands pikuach nefesh lefonenu is if you look at it from a global perspective, a long-term perspective. If I'm not allowing you now to carry back your weapons, then somewhere down the line, somebody is not going to go to war, and that will cause a loss of life, then all that is included befonenu, pikuach nefesh, sakana befonenu. And therefore, there's no difference, he says, how often it's going to happen. If it happens 1 in 1,000, or 1 in 5,000, or 1 in 10,000. Because eventually it's for sure going to happen. All that's called sakana befonenu. Maybe that's the het of Atzola going back, I'm not sure. But that's the chiddush of the Rambam, that he learned from Kiddush HaChodesh. That if it's for sure going to happen at some point down the line, that's called pikuach nefesh befonenu, and that's sakana befonenu. And when I have to paskin, not for you individually, but for the klal, the tzibur on large, it's for sure going to happen at some point down the line. All that's called pikuach nefesh lefonenu.
Rav Ralbag.
Yes.
Does this only apply for pikuach nefesh on Shabbos, or could you extend this also to what you mentioned last time about autopsy or organ transplantation?
Wait, Dr. Bloomdahl, let's start. We're going chatnisht. We're going step by step. I might have to go overtime and break into your lunch break. I apologize, but we have to finish this because it's too important to let it go. Rabbijn Katz, it's pikuach nefesh if we don't continue with this. So we have to continue.
Rabbi Ralbag, the next year is only at 2.
I know. There's
only thing is we might have then to double mincha also over Zoom.
Okay, give me 10 minutes. I'll finish.
All fine.
Okay. One second. So that's the chiddush over here, massive chiddush. He goes a step further, and listen to this unbelievable chiddush. If you're looking in a macro level, and you're looking that something is going to happen down the line, that's the chiddush that he wants to say. Not just you look at something down the line, because that's all pikuach nefesh lefonenu. But he wants to explain with that a famous story, a famous maisa that happened in 1849. Famous story, there's a whole debate on the story if it even happened. Rav Asher Weiss in the Sefer says the story never happened, but it's yadua that this story happened. There was a cholera epidemic in Vilna in 1849. And it was a big machlekes. Of course, somebody who's not feeling well has to eat. But there was a machlekes whether somebody who's healthy, should he eat as well? Because since there's a magefa of cholera, and somebody who's weak might die from it if you don't eat. So the question, are you allowed to eat even if somebody's healthy? So the Rabbanim of Vilna paskins, you're not allowed to eat. The sakana is not befonenu for a healthy person. It's 1 in 10,000 that a healthy person will get it and die from it. Not sakana b'fonenu, not allowed to eat. On Yom Kippur, shiurim, just like a muberes, a woman that's pregnant. Rabbi Yisrael Salanta, the great head of the Muslim movement, was also a big guy. Rabbi Yisrael Salanta got up in shul on Yom Kippur, and he made kiddush b'fnei ngam v'ngayda. In front of everybody, he made kiddush, and he had cake and mezainis in front of everybody. And he says, everybody has to eat. And they all disagreed with him. It's not sakana b'fonenu. It's a healthy person. Why does everybody have to eat? Pikuach nefesh, so what? There's no pikuach nefesh, sakana b'fonenu. And it's not clear why he did it. So Rabbi Yisraeli wants to say, you know why he did it? Because he did not look just at one person. He had to give a psak for the entire kehillah, for the entire city. And there's going to be, amongst all the people, if I give a psak on macro, there's going to be one person in the kehillah that's going to be an old and sick person and thinks he's healthy. But when I give a psak on mass, macro, for a big tzibur, I don't know. Not everybody's going to come and ask me a question. You, yes, you know. I have to give a psak for everybody. Somebody in the Rabbijn is going to be a choyle and might not know it. So therefore, that's called sakana b'fonenu for everybody. Of course, if you come and ask me, Shaila, I'm a healthy person, should I fast? Then maybe not. Of course not. Not sakana b'fonenu. But if you look at a macro level and you see everybody and I have to paskin for the whole city and not everybody comes to ask me, Shaila, then everybody has to eat. Why? Because for sure somebody is going to be sick amongst them and won't ask and will die because of it. That's called sakana b'fonenu. Just like the Rambam says that later Shabbosim is all called pikuach nefesh b'fonenu because you look at a macro level, you look at Shabbosim down the line. So too, if I have to paskin right now and there's a big crowd and I don't know who yes and who no, all that's called sakana b'fonenu. Massive chiddush. Look at number 6a. V'achayu nira lani is daiti loima. Kedaitum sharabone vil nohoisa binyan shenogana boy hechesh sakana dain enu lefonenu v'ademu bori ela shalula lavoy might happen. That's only a miut, and therefore that's not permitted. V'das, second arrow. V'das agoynik b'sol salanta efshel lechavein apim mavur b'may ma'aris, which he wrote. Shekeshiesh diyun, if there's a discussion al baya on a situation hamakifa es haklal that deals with the klal, sorich lachshav, you have to think lo yal kol mikre o mikre lechud, on every situation ela ala kol yachat, everything together. Umitoch kach yesh leimar, and because of that you can say shezeh vadai, of course, shelamarot sheklape kol eyochid hasakana leishchicha, for every individual there is no sakana b'fonenu. Aval bein tzibur gadol v'dati, amongst a huge tzibur of 10,000, 100,000 people in Vilna, lo yemalet, it's not going to be lost. It will not happen. She'echad oikama yifgu olav atzoim, v'alkein, that some people will die because of this fast, because they're fasting. V'alkein ha'achilo shel kulam, everybody eating, harezi pikuach nefesh, latzolas oisam yechidim. If you look at a grand level, that's pikuach nefesh b'fonenu.
But Rav Ralbag, could I?
1 second. That's a massive chiddush. Massive chiddush. He took the Rambam, which talks about future Shabbosim, and that's called b'fonenu. And he says even if it's now, but it's for a big tzibur, then there's clearly b'fonenu for somebody, and therefore I can be matter for everybody, because that's sakonas nefoshes b'fonenu. That's not only, even though it's not tivis, it's not inherent, it's not a Basha Weiss's chiddush, but it's called b'fonenu. Let me just show you two rayas. 1 second. One raya that the Mishnah Berurah seems to say a similar type of thing in number 8. Look at number 8. Let's start with number 7 first. The Gemara says in Shabbos quickly, number 7. Let's do number 8 first. Says the Shulchan Aruch about putting out a fire on Shabbos. In their days, about taking out a fire. Today, when we're amongst Goyim, there's a big chshas when there's a fire, they'll come and they'll plunder and they'll kill. You're allowed to extinguish a fire in Shabbos. You're allowed to take off a fire in Shabbos, even if just your house, mammon, you're allowed to. Maybe this pikuach nefesh, even as a chash, you're allowed to. Says the Mishbura, you're always allowed to take out a fire. Why? If you're not going to extinguish the fire, al yechsar, it's not going to be lost, meaning it's not going to happen. Because maybe somewhere in the city there'll be an old man that cannot run away from the fire, and we don't know about. That's called sakana b'fanenu. It's mikris. What's the chance it's going to hurt somebody? But amongst the whole city, there's one person that might get killed from it, and you have to paskin for the whole city. So that's called sakana b'fanenu. A similar type of svara. We see the same in number 7 as well. It says about if you have I'll say it very quickly. If you have a piece of wood that's on fire, or a piece of metal that's on fire, so that's on the street. So the halacha is that you're allowed to extinguish the metal, but you're not allowed to extinguish the wood. Why? So the Rishonim say because extinguishing wood is a malacha d'oraisa. At least it makes pecham, it makes ashes, and that's called a real extinguishing. That's kibui. But extinguishing a metal that doesn't create any pchamim, it doesn't create any coals, and therefore that's not an iser d'oraisa. That you're allowed to extinguish. But the gechela shel eitz you're not allowed to. That's what Pashup Pshat is.
Ralbag,
yes.
If you take this mahalach, then every dover bilti mikri, you should also be matir.
We're going to Dr. Bia, 1 second. I want to answer Benzi Longstein first. I just want to show this one halacha, and I'll say the same thing. Basically, I'm saying is that let's get back to 2 questions in a minute. So the Ran on the Rif says from the Baal Hichas Gedolos, he says that even in Issa D'Oraisa, even the reason says a wood you're not allowed to, because the wood remains the fire, people see it. But a metal, even if it's D'Oraisa, and it might be D'Oraisa, you're allowed to extinguish. Why? Because people are not going to see it. And the question he asks is, he says, V'divrei teimahem, heich yatesh shmuel malacha d'oraisa shalei makom sakanas nefashos, which means, if you tell me extinguishing a piece of metal is a malacha d'oraisa, how could you do that under the Shus Rabbim? Why is that permitted? Why can you do that? It's a chashash. It's not sakanas nefashos. It's so far removed. Says the Ran, Ela shenira soiver, Rav soiver, the nizka de Rabbim kesakanas nefashos chashiv lan. That if you're talking about a Rabbim, that's like pikuach nefesh. Why? Because amongst the 100,000 people in the city, there'll be one old man that's not going to see the fire. That's called pikuach nefesh the Rabbim. That's called sakanas nefashos. Even though every person can watch himself, but it's lo yitachen. It's not shayach that one person is not going to get hurt for sure. That's called sakana b'fanenu. So that's the chiddush. 2 rayas, but that's the chiddush. That we see that if you're passing a pikuach nefesh for a klal, for a tzibur, not on an individual basis, but you're passing for the whole tzibur, you don't just look as pikuach nefesh on this case, but like the Rambam says, you look on all future Shabbosim, that's all called pikuach nefesh, and you don't just look on this one person, but you're also on the whole tzibur. It's for sure going to happen. Somebody's going to die. That's called sakana b'fanenu, even if it's not a sakana tivit, even if it's not inherent, even if it's a sakana mikris, and it's a vaitach shash, but it's for sure going to happen. then that would be included in sakana befanenu. Bensi, let me hear your question first, and then Dr. Bio.
Yeah, in line with, I think, what Dr. Beer wanted to say is that if you follow this mahalach, is this only applicable on a heter in a case of pikuach nefesh, or can you also say it's with an iser? For example, driving a car. Maybe Chazal should say you can't drive a car because for you individually it's not a pikuach nefesh, but we know if 1 million people are driving a car on a day, we know several people are going to die. So maybe you should.
It's interesting you say that. Because they talk about pikuach nefesh, and the raya they bring, I saw the raya they bring, is driving a car, exactly that case. Driving a car is not pikuach nefesh on the individual basis. But if I tell you as prime minister that 100,000 people will get killed every year on the street because driving a car, then that's something you have to be mitchashev with. So maybe you have to make rules for the 100,000. Since 100,000 deaths will occur, you have to make rules because of that. I don't know. It's a good question. I don't have the answer to that. But this is a big chiddush. The raya they want to bring is from Reb Shlomo Zalman. Listen to Reb Shlomo Zalman. With that, I'll finish, and then we'll go weiter. Dr. Bio, you had a question, or is that part of your question? Dr. Bio, I'm sorry, I didn't. Yeah, go ahead.
No, what I said was, if you take this malach which you brought us just now, that means that even everything which is bilti tivi and bilti mikri also could be under the umbrella of Suffolk pikuach nefesh and would be mutar.
But only
and the second thing is the difference if you say that the whole issa is because of the chuya chil Shabbos or because Shabbos is not existing.
Maybe depends on hutra and the chuya, but the chiddush is even if it's not befonenu, it's still called befonenu. I'm not sure if it depends on hutra or the chuya. I'm not really sure if it depends on that. Let me show you the chiddush of Reb Shlomo Zalman, and it will make it clearer to understand. Let's see number 9 on the sheet. Bishnas Tafshin Nun Beis. In 19, number 9 on the sheet, Rabbi Katz, make it a little bigger. Bishnas Tafshin Nun Beis. In 1982, right? His oira, 1992. His oira sheila legabi nituach shelach hamavis. There was a question of doing an autopsy. Matzavo shel tinok Yerushalmi. There was a child, Yerushalmi child, Hechel Dadel Zman Ktsat Achet Shekibol Chisun Neget Daleket Kavet Negifit. He had a liver infection and he took a vaccine. I don't know what that is exactly, but he had some vaccine. V'hu niftar toch sha'ot sfurot mikabalat hachisun, and he died within hours of getting the vaccine. Misrad HaBriut bikesh levatzer nitichita. So the Misrad HaBriut wanted to make an autopsy. Why did this child die from a vaccine? Is there a connection between giving the vaccine and the child dying? I think this is Professor Steinberg. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that is him, but maybe. When I was asked to give my opinion on Nisi, I answered, maybe there's a halachic permission to make the autopsy. If there's a connection between the giving the vaccine and the child dying, then you can save other children from similar situations. And that the government will know how to administer vaccines properly, because maybe there's a correlation, a connection between the vaccine and the child dying. But the truth is, the connection between the vaccine and death is so tiny. Because millions of children have gotten this vaccine, and many got this vaccine, and nobody got any side effects. But nevertheless, maybe it's pikuach nefesh, shel Rabbijn, it's okay. So his question is, a child dies from a vaccine. Millions of children get the vaccine. It's for sure, echshash rachok mod. Are you allowed to do nituach? Are you allowed to do autopsy? La'ach hashmias kol hanesunim shoy v'yadeinu, posek of Shlomo Zalman, ba'ofen chat mashmi. Shlomo Zalman paskent, shetzorich lenatech es gufas hatinoik, mishum chashas kayomim, that you have to do an autopsy. Lemarot she'yabaru lo hetev im lo b'shom zamenu, k'fi shu batma gamit, he said himself, shem duba b'shchash rachok. 1 in a million doesn't get sick from it. So why are we doing it? Hu chazer az b'fanenu kama pamim, ala chayv lizoy b'chshash b'gor nefesh, ye'yuchel b'shum inyan lidei misas yisrael. What does that mean? So the svar they want to say is, what does Shlomo Zalman mean? After all, it's not going to happen. So like the Noda B'Yehuda says, stam to make nituchei mesim for a future thing, that's not b'fanenu. But here Shlomo Zalman felt that a child died, so that's b'fanenu. Why is it b'fanenu? The answer is, because you're right now it's not b'fanenu. And it's not even tivis. It's mikris, a chisun, somebody dying from a vaccine. But at some point down the line, it's for sure going to happen again. When I'm paskening, when I look at the whole tzibur, I have to take into consideration the rabbim, then the gauge of pikuach nefesh is a much lower threshold. It's for sure going to happen at some point down the line to some child, and therefore doing the nituach, the autopsy now, is going to prevent this pikuach nefesh at some point down the line. That's for sure going to happen. And it's a rabbim that changes the level of pikuach nefesh. That's considered b'fanenu as well. Based on this svara, there's another svara to be matir the guns and the radios for shmirah. Because you're right, my shul being hit is 1 in 100,000. But if you're going to paskin for the whole America, what should you do? Some shul at some point will be hit again, no matter what. We know that. Then when you're looking at the rabbim, that's called pikuach nefesh b'fanenu. That's something to be matir. Then if you have to give a psak for the rabbim, then that's perhaps a psak to be matir. That's all called b'fanenu. And therefore, at least for the rabbanon, you can be matir, and that's called pikuach nefesh b'fanenu. So that's a massive chiddush. I agree it's a big chiddush, but it's a good yesod to know. So therefore, we have 2 yesodas in pikuach nefesh. One is Basha Weiss, and that's a svara that if it's tivius, if it's inherent, that's called b'fanenu, like a marechet, an organization, a hospital, that's part of the nature of the hospital. That's called sakana b'fanenu. Then there's another svara that if you're paskening for a global situation, for a tzibur, for a mass situation, like a Bisol Salanta pasken for the whole city, then if one person is going to get it, that's called pikuach nefesh b'fanenu. It's for sure going to happen to one person. And I have to give a psak for everybody? That's called pikuach nefesh b'fanenu, and that's called, you can eat on Yom Kippur, a Bisol Salanta. Others disagreed with him, but that was maybe the psak of a Bisol Salanta. And that's a psak why Shlomo Zalman allowed to do the nituach on this child, the autopsy, because at some point down the line, it's for sure going to happen. I have to paskin globally. That's pikuach nefesh b'fanenu. And maybe that's a heta for guns as well. And according to that, it would come out a big chiddush. It would come out that after everybody takes the vaccine of corona, and then there's some people who say, no, I'm not taking the vaccine. Could you prevent them from coming to shul? So maybe every situation, what's the chance that somebody in shul is going to come who is immunocompromised, the vaccine did not help him, and he's going to get sick from you? Shash rachok mod. But if you have to make a policy across, then maybe yes. Maybe there's such a svar. In America, I know, they don't let kids into school who don't take vaccines. Why? Shash rachok mod. But at some point down the line, if we're going to Torah Masara, if they say that, you know what, you don't have to have vaccines, some point down the line, somebody will get sick and die from it. That's called pikuach nefesh b'fanenu. That's a massive chiddush, but that's what I think. These are the 3 gedorim, or the concepts of pikuach nefesh that we learned today. The first yesod being that it has to be b'fanenu. If it's not b'fanenu, it's nothing. That's the spider that we saw the briskerov, muberes, chayles. It has to be b'fanenu. The second yesod we saw that even if it's b'fanenu, there's a difference between the fire and if it's tivis, if it's inherent. And based on that, Asher Weiss wants to say that even if it's not mamash b'fanenu, if it's part of the marechet, part of the way it goes, that's called b'fanenu, like the hospitals. And then we saw even bigger chiddush based on the Rambam, that you allow Pikuach Nefesh for future Shabbosim, that's all part of this Shabbos, that's all part of this Pikuach Nefesh. It's a preparation, machshir, for this Pikuach Nefesh. You take everything into account, future Shabbosim as well. You look at it from a macro level, global level, and then the bigger Chiddush is that even if it's right now, it's not down the line, but it's for a big tzibur, that's all called befonenu, because at some point somebody for sure will die from it. Right now, the tzibur, the B'Sol Salant in the city, or the autopsy and the child, it's for sure going to happen in a global scale with all these people. That might even be called tzakana befonenu. I'm not giving a shia halach lemaisa, but I'm bringing up, these are the ideas, these are the svaras to understand what's called pikuach nefesh.
Ralbag, what was the consequence? Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, I'm listening.
Yeah, what was the consequence of Rab Shlomo Zalman with a child? If you find there's a connection between the vaccination and the dying of the child.
I don't. But the consequence was, if you find it, then you'll know for the future when you have to give another 1 million vaccinations to all these children you have to give, you'll say, you know what? But take it like this, or do it like that, or maybe we have to make sure, look for these signs.
Or should you forbid it? I mean,
no, you can't forbid it because you have to take vaccinations. Why?
Right.
Because people die more from not taking vaccinations.
Yeah, right.
But you know that, maybe there's a correlation. I take a vaccination without doing this, or looking, if I see these signs, I know right away to jump in. I need to know that because somewhere along the line, it might happen again. That's the chiddush over here when you look at the tzibur on large.
Okay, sorry.
Rabbi Ralbag, the last parts, and also Shlomo Zalman.
Hold on 1 second, please. Yeah, go ahead.
The last part where you brought Rabbi Shlomo Zalman, also the Ran and the Rambam, they all talk about Hezeka the Rabbim, and it could be it's not Sakona Befanenu, but it's rather because it affects so many people, then that we allow it, even if it's not Sakona Befanenu.
That means Befanenu. That's the svara. The svara is it affects so many people, so it's for sure going to happen right now. That's befonenu. You want to say even that's not because befonenu, because Tama Zaka the Rabbim. Ezeka the Rabbim Mechal Shabbos, that's a chiddush. I know the Ran seems to say like that, but that's a chiddush just because it's Rabbim. I'm saying much better. That's called befonenu. For sure.
That's also the lotion of the Gemara and the Rambam. They also all mention Ezeka the Rabbim.
Right. But it's only a chiddush of the Bahag. The Ran brings from the Bahag, and nobody holds like that. To say that's the pshat, maybe I'll just put a raya from that. But that's a B'Sol Salanta. That's what he tried to accomplish. Listen, they all disagreed with him in Vilna with the Chiddush of B'Sol Salanta. Right? They didn't like it what he did, but he held like that. Some people, I saw Basha Weiss in the Sefer. He decides the whole story is not true. He said, I would have heard about it. When he decided he puts doubt on the whole story that it might have even happened. So to paskin based on that, I don't know. But that's maybe the Svara B'Sol Salanta. That's called Befonenu. Not just because it's Rabbim, that's called B'fanenu. It's for sure going to happen to somebody in the city right now, that's called B'fanenu. And when I have to paskin for everybody, that's the Chash the Rabbim. And maybe that's the heter also of walkie-talkies on Shabbos and guns, because that's called, at some point, anywhere in America, it's going to happen, and if you have to paskin for everybody, maybe that's the heter. Again, I did not need that heter. I got a heter from Basha Weiss, because of his svara, and he gave me halach lemaisa to be matir. In America, Bas is in Eruv, by you in Amsterdam, there's also an Eruv, so there's no deraisa anyway. It's only the Rabbanon carrying guns. It's only the Rabbanon, so therefore you can do that. And
Thank
even
you.
walkie-talkies, if you don't use it, it's only the Rabbanon, and that's permitted.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? So, Rabbi Ralbag, thank you so much. I just want to conclude with a little machshava from the parsha. Yesterday we read in the parsha that when Yaakov Avinu, when he came to Egypt, that he said Kir Shema. He said Kir Shema. He's still there, Rabbi Ralbag?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
It's directed to you. He said Kir Shema when he saw Yosef. So why did he say Kir Shema? Because Yosef sent a message, when I left, I learned Egla Rufa. And then when the Taka saw Yosef, said Yosef, he said, Krishma to dank the Eibishter. Baruch Hashem, your father, not only, your father is a God of a Torah. We have been enjoying the Shiurim for the past 2 days. And now, it's not just one in the Torah of Egla Rufo, it's Shas and Paiskim, Rishonim, Acharonim, and Heiteger Paiskim, all zusammen. So if Yaakov wieder to Kriya Shema, your father Kabbacham has to say Kriya Shema when he sees you, to dank the Eivish to give such a gewaltige son. A gewaltige Shkoyach, you stop yourself an hour to learn, to Sharis. We say goodbye. A groische Shkoyach, Oilim had a gewaltige Hano. Thank you, and regards to the Tate.
Thank you, Rabbijn Katz. I appreciate your warm words. I appreciate it very much. And listen, I enjoy, there's something about Gierse de Yankese. Yeah. So growing up in Amsterdam, that has my Jeugend, and I see people that I recognize still, from I remember still, also recognize and remember from all these years ago, and to be Marbitz Torah and to learn with everybody together, it's always a pleasure. It's of course better if we can do it in Mitzvah Hashem in live. Then there's interaction, and we can have I remember always after we'd have lunch, I'd have the delicious Hollandse kaas by lunch in the Jarchei Kallo. Mitzvah Hashem, another time we'll be able to do that. But Yashkoyach to everybody for listening and participating, and we should continue to learn Torah. Kihem chayenu va'arech yameinu. Everything.
Thank you so much. To everybody, have a great day. Regards to everybody else. I'm going to leave the program on. I'll put the video off. And then in Mitzvah Hashem, I'll open it up a few minutes before 2. There's now time for everybody to have lunch at home, whatever where you are. And we'll continue I'll open it up again at around 10 to 2. Till then, zeggen we dan smakelijk eten, of u kaas eet, of pekelvlees, maakt niet uit als het maar smaakt. Dank u wel.
Schouw.
Of een falafel.
Nou, ik geef hem maar liever een broodje met pekelvlees, ja.
Geweldig.